As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain, keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
That voice you hear is Harry, our station manager at WNHH, and I always like to wish Harry a happy holiday season and happy new year, and by derivative, everyone else that's listening. But it's important to kind of build the relationship. It's important to kind of keep the communication going. You read so much about what the definition of leadership is. For me, leadership is just relating the people and relating to yourself and keeping a goal, some common goals in mind. Today, it's Monday, December 19th, and we're going to definitely talk about some common goals. And it occurs to me, as my guests, Dr. Eric Weiner and Reverend Dr. Leroy O'Perry and Reverend Elvin Clayton weigh in, that this is a perfect show because people often talk about New Year's resolutions, but certainly in 2023, you're going to encounter somebody or know someone that will have cancer or is going to get diagnosed for cancer, or let's be frank, will die of cancer. And so we want to kind of talk about as we move into 2023, cancer care health disparities. Yes, that is a reality. But how can we draft down that reality as well? So Dr. Eric Weiner is with us. Dr. Eric Weiner assumed the role as director of the Yale Cancer Center and physician-in-chief of Smilo Cancer Network as of this past February. And as mentioned, this show will look at how he plans, and not just he, but how do we, it's he and we, plan to drive down cancer mortality by building really fair and equitable access to cancer care and research, not only in New Haven, but in the surrounding areas. And if truth be told, the Yale is a global institution. It has a leadership role. It depends and motivates and is coordinated in terms of inspiration and leadership. So this show is not just for the research in New Haven and surrounding areas. We want to amend that word to the surrounding world. So Dr. Eric Weiner is the Alfred Gilman Professor of Pharmacology and Professor of Medicine. He's Director of Yale Cancer Center, as I mentioned, and Physician-in-Chief at the Smilo Cancer Center. Reverend Dr. Leroy O'Perry Jr. is Pastor of St. Stephen's AME Church and Cultural Ambassador of the Yale Clinical Research Program. And we're joined, last but not least, by Reverend Elvin Clayton, Pastor of Walters Memorial AME Zion Church and Cultural Ambassador to the Yale Clinical Research Program. Mighty gents, good morning. How's everybody?
Good morning.
Good. Dr. Weiner, let's kick it off for the next 50 minutes or so. And, tell us a little bit about your new role as the director of the Yale Cancer Center. It's my first time kind of seeing you, so welcome, if I can extend my personal welcome. And so tell us about your role and also you're the physician-in-chief of the Smilo Cancer Network.
So I think I have to start by just talking a little bit about me and how I got here. So in some ways, I'm a pretty boring person. I've lived in 3 cities in my whole life. I grew up in Boston. I came here to college and spent 13 years, hopefully doing a little more than college, but I went to college here and started in graduate school in Russian studies and ended up deciding I wanted to be a doctor and going to medical school and doing some training here. Then I was down at Duke for 10 years. By this point, I was married and had kids. And then we all moved back to Boston about 25 years ago. And I spent most of my career running the breast cancer program at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and being both a breast cancer researcher and a breast cancer clinician. And truth be told, I am really thrilled to be back here. I never thought that we would move back to New Haven and to Yale. I was pretty happy in Boston, but it felt like this was an opportunity I couldn't pass on. And in my role, I'm the person responsible for moving the research forward within the Cancer Center, and at the same time, overseeing the clinical care that we give to patients with cancer in Yale New Haven Hospital and in our surrounding hospitals.
Excellent, excellent. And it just occurred to me that some of our shows get rather complex, but this is a basic show, but it's also a complex show because every question we're going to pose and every topic we're going to discuss is a way of just really illuminating how we can reduce cancer health disparities. So Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, I encourage you to kind of jump in. But just before you do, Dr. Weiner, it might be a little confusing to folks because you hear the Yale Cancer Center, then you hear Smilo Cancer Center, Smilo Cancer Network, I should say. So what is there a functional or operative difference, or is there a difference in meaning?
So yes and no, and it really is not meant to confuse people. So technically, the Yale Cancer Center is part of Yale University and the School of Medicine. And I think, as people know, Yale New Haven Hospital and Yale New Haven Health System is technically a separate entity. It's a separate corporate entity. And that's where care is delivered. But the truth is that the two are very closely aligned. They're becoming more and more aligned. And the fact that my job is essentially in both places really speaks to the fact that this is where we do cancer clinical care. It's where we do cancer research and where we educate people, the next generation of health professionals. And it's really all one and the same in my view.
Excellent.
The more we blur any distinctions, the better it is for us and the better it is for the public.
Perfect. Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton, let's dive in, because again, the general theme is how do we reduce these health disparities, and the fact that Dr. Weiner and others acknowledge that there are health disparities. So this is let's just dive in. Any thoughts that come to your mind as we open up the show?
Yes,
Reverend
Dr.
Perry?
Weiner, we were fortunate to hear you at the Cambria Hotel.
Yep.
When you were talking about advances and challenges in breast cancer treatment and how it affects disadvantaged populations. If you could talk a little about that, that would be great.
So I'm always happy to talk about breast cancer because I've spent my life focusing on breast cancer, but really everything I say about breast cancer applies to cancer across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So there are huge disparities in healthcare in general, and certainly in cancer care in the United States, and very clearly in New Haven and in Connecticut as a whole. And just to focus for a second on one statistic, if you are a 20-year-old Black American woman, you have twice the chance of dying from breast cancer by the time you're 50 compared to a 20-year-old white American woman.
Oh.
Now, that is just not okay. And there are many, many possible reasons. We know some of them. We don't fully understand others. But in my mind, that statistic alone says it's time to act. And again, we may not have all the answers, but we can try to learn more and more as we're acting, not just observing. As cancer treatment gets better and better, and as I think almost everyone knows, there's been really a revolution in cancer treatment over the past 2 decades. And there are more and more drug therapies and other treatments that are available. We're able to cure more people than ever before. Not that we have all the answers, and not that there still aren't many people who are dying because we don't have the right treatments. But the better the treatments get, the more tragic the disparity is. Because when you don't have very good treatment, if one person gets a little bit less optimal treatment than another, but if the outcome is the same for everyone, it doesn't seem to me quite as horrific. But when we know we have treatments that can prolong life, that can reduce suffering, that can cure people, and we can't apply those across the board, then I think it's just criminal.
Oh.
You,
Is that national? Is that in New
So
Haven?
the breast cancer statistic is a national statistic, but I don't have any reason to believe it doesn't apply equally well to Connecticut. And we know that there are disparities, not just in breast cancer, but in lung cancer, in prostate cancer, in multiple myeloma, on and on and on. And, you know, thankfully, the National Cancer Institute has really embraced the need to do something. And there are, in the United States, 52 comprehensive cancer centers. One of them is Yale. We've been a comprehensive cancer center since 1974. And it used to be that the purpose of being designated a comprehensive cancer center and what one was supposed to do with the grant that we as a cancer center received from the National Cancer Institute was to really help organize the science, and it had relatively little to do with having an impact on the community. And now what has changed is that in the criteria for receiving these awards, what is featured very, very prominently is the need to embrace the community, to have an impact on the community, to bring the community into cancer research and cancer care, and to really do something that's going to make a difference for people who are, you know, living within our area.
So Reverend Clayton, Reverend Perry, myself, and Dr. Weiner. So let's drill down on that thought. What can we, the collective we, and do, and what should the collective we do, and what can the collective we do in this regard in terms of reducing cancer disparities?
You want me to start that one?
You've been I've done this show for a few years, and it's rare to have a guest and an informed and expert guest come out of the box really stating the challenge, stating the historical challenge so clearly and succinctly. And as we move to 23, yes, I need you. This is a brainstorming show at the moment. Whether we need to protest, whether we need to picket, whether we need to not submit our tax returns, whether we need to run candidates.
I think we need to act, and
Okay.
so I won't pretend to have all the answers myself at all, and I need to rely upon many, many others who have been working in this area of healthcare disparities for their entire careers. In some ways, I'm a newcomer to this. You know, I've talked about this for the last decade, but I'm not someone who has actually done most of my work has not been research on healthcare disparities, so I have to turn to others. But we need to have partnerships between the community and between doctors and healthcare systems. It's not going to work for the Yale Cancer Center, Smilo, call it whatever you want here, but it's not going to work for us to just go out and say, we need for you to come in and get care, because if you don't get care, you're not going to do as well. There are lots and lots of reasons why people, and I'm going to focus specifically on Black men and women, because I think that's where the problem is the greatest. There are lots of reasons why people traditionally have not had access and have not been able to take advantage of the care that's available. And for those answers, we often can't look inward, we have to look outward, and we have to embrace people in the community. So people like Marcella Nunez Smith, who has a long history of doing outreach work in the community, have to help us, as do all of you, and we all have to work together to both get the message out, but then to help people come in and get care. And it's not just a matter of coming in once. getting cancer treatment is a big commitment. It's lots of visits. It's lots of treatments. It's side effects. It can be expensive. And we need to help people get through all of that. It's a little bit like you have a new position and you want to recruit somebody. Well, you need to not just recruit them, you need to retain them after they're there. And we need to make sure that patients feel comfortable coming to see us. We need to sometimes go out and see people in their own environment. And then we need to make it easier for people. And again, I don't have all the answers. I do know that if you're a woman with breast cancer who's 35 and you have 3 children under the age of 10, and one of them, let's say, has some chronic medical issue themselves, and you don't have a lot of financial resources, that prioritizing your health may not be the thing that you immediately think of. And so we need to help people do that.
Indeed. And it seems to me, Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, this is a good chance to kind of just remind people about the Dr. Weiner's talked about this nexus of communication, this interlocking kind of movement and motif for how we can bring everybody on board in terms of the Freedom Health Train. It seems to me that this is a good opportunity to kind of elaborate on the role of the cultural ambassadors to the Yale Clinical Research Program and why historically it's been so seminal, and then moving into 2023, it will continue to kind of build the momentum.
Can I just say one other thing first, though?
Sure.
Which is that if I say anything that doesn't resonate with all of you, and if I misspeak about anything related to the community, just tell me, because I don't have your expertise.
Reverend Perry and Dr. Weiner, I really appreciate that. And I think in some ways we're all kind of working in the dark. So as we want to shed light in 23 on all of us. So just wonder, Reverend Perry, if you had any comment in this regard.
Yeah, I think Dr. Weiner, you're so correct when you say it's not either side of the coin, it's both sides of the coin. Because we can tell people, we can communicate the necessity and the essential necessity for people to go in and get screened and get checked. But what I heard you say at one of the meetings was that some of these tests cost so much money, and if you don't have any health care, you may not even get that particular screening, which means here again, it's both. We've got to be able to either change policy with Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever, so that people who are marginalized can, in fact, be in the picture. I mean, in the ballpark for the healing that we're talking about. And as long as that disparity is there, we really have a problem. The other thing I think I heard you say was that even if we had new discoveries and therapies, if we didn't have the people coming in to get screened, it really doesn't make a difference here. It doesn't really matter unless you come in for the screening or for the testing. And I think that's essential.
At your front door.
Reverend Clayton?
Yes, Dr. Weiner, you are so on point with your comments and remarks thus far. But there was something that I wanted to ask or share. There are so many men who do have means, who do have insurance, and they die young of prostate cancer, which seems to be ridiculous when we know that if they can get tested early enough, that it's over 90% chance that they will survive that. And when you tell us and telling our audience that people should be screened, people should go in, how much louder do we have to sound the trumpet to get these brothers to move forward to protect their own health?
So maybe we need to go to them. And, there are many aspects of the healthcare system that are not very friendly for any of us. I mean, since I've been in New Haven, I've had a few medical issues, and I'll tell you that as the cancer center director and somebody who's got plenty of health insurance and plenty of, health related education, I find it hard to deal with the healthcare system. Now, imagine what it's like for everybody else. And then on top of it, look, the fact of the matter is we have mostly white doctors, less so nurses, but still mostly white nurses. And I think that there are many reasons why Black men and women are sometimes a little suspicious of the healthcare system and, don't feel like it's been built for them. And so we need to make a special effort. Now, of course, the other thing we need to do is, of course, diversify our healthcare providers, and we're making major efforts to do that. But we need to act before we can fully diversify, because that's going to take a little while.
Thank you.
Are you
And
on mute?
with prostate cancer screening, it's a blood test for the most part. I mean, there's a physical exam too, but the blood test in and of itself is quite valuable. And that's something that can be done in churches, it can be done in community centers, it can be done any place.
Excellent. Dr. Wenner, I'm thinking before we come back to and continue on this theme of disparities, preventive care, we hear this term a lot. And given your involvement for this last several decades, and really so pleased that you started at the top of the show, kind of sharing with people really your commitment and passion and carrying this cross, so that if I can use that expression, with such an optimistic point of view. From preventative care, what would you suggest, or what does the research show, and your experience, your anecdotal or actual evidence-based research show in terms of the impact and need for preventative care?
Well, I mean, the more we can do to prevent, the better we are. In terms of cancer, the two biggest things we can do to prevent cancer is, number one, not use tobacco products, and number two, not gain a lot of weight. Because at the moment, tobacco use is probably still the biggest cause of cancer that we can potentially prevent. But it is very soon going to be replaced as more and more people are quitting smoking. And at the same time, more and more people are becoming more and more overweight. It's going to be quickly replaced by being overweight. And there are 13 different cancers that are increased in incidence and in most cases mortality as a result of excess body weight. So this is a big problem. And those are the two biggest areas. Of course, getting physical activity helps, but it may help more than anything else by helping to control body weight.
And not to dive too deep into the weeds, and I'm not going to ask you to give a grand round presentation on obesity, but from a layperson's standpoint, what 2 or 3 sentences could you share about what happens to the body with it being an enlarged size, so to speak?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research going on regarding that, and there isn't one answer. But it may well relate to insulin and what happens in terms of various metabolic controls. And it also may result in a state of chronic inflammation. And inflammation in and of itself can lead to the development of cancer. So there are people who think of being overweight or being obese as a chronic inflammatory condition. But there's probably more to it than that as well. and it's complicated, and it may well be that the reason that that being overweight increases the risk of breast cancer may be very different than why it increases the risk of pancreatic cancer.
Hmm.
And, you know, I think as everyone knows, in the United States, we have a real epidemic of obesity at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a light question. People who really love cakes and pies,
Mm-hmm.
and
You mean like me?
I didn't hear you, doctor.
I said, you mean like me?
Yes, yeah. Well, if you're one of those people,
I am.
I'm with you about 200%. But how serious is that when it comes to cancers?
So I don't think the problem is eating a piece of cake or pie. I think
Yeah.
the problem is if you eat enough so that you really put on a lot of body weight. And by the way, the other thing I should mention is that significant alcohol use also increases the risk of certain kinds of cancer too.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's no reason why people can't have a glass of wine or two or a drink or two on an intermittent basis. But, you know, the recommendations are that women do not consume more than an average of 1 alcoholic beverage a day, and men not consume more than 2.
Dr. Wan, I had a question. When you mentioned the 52 comprehensive cancer centers, it is clear to me that not all centers are equal. That outcomes in one center with prostate cancer may be completely different or lower than in other centers.
Yeah.
And one of the doctors that we had on our show mentioned that to us, and he said that it could also be related to the doctors themselves and their training. Just as an open question, like I know you're not going to say Yale is the best center, but
Well, it is, but I'll say it for her.
if you had, so each center might have a different, like for example, if you're in New York or if you're in Connecticut, people are going to go to the center that's closest. But if I had the rich folk, I'm just saying, could find the center that has the best outcomes, right, and probably get the better treatment because they can afford it and because they know the statistics. Like right now, out of 52, I would always think that I went to Yale, so I'm thinking, oh, Yale's going to be the best, or Harvard's going to be the best, or Stanford's going to be the best. But in reality, we don't know. Is there a way we could determine that? And does that really affect our outcomes in a place like New Haven?
So, you know, it's really hard to assess outcomes at different centers, oftentimes because patient populations vary so much. I think that it's probably fair to say that if you're a patient and you go to any one of the 52 comprehensive cancer centers, plus, and there are many others that are not comprehensive cancer centers that are very, very good, that probably going to do about as well as you can. I mean, I don't know that debating whether there's one place that's the very best, you know, is worth a lot of energy. I do think that that people need to go someplace where they're comfortable and where they feel that they can communicate with their doctors, and a place where there are specialists, because increasingly, and I think this is a pretty important point, cancer is complicated. Cancer isn't one disease. Breast cancer itself is probably 6 or 8 different, very distinct diseases that all happen to arise in the breast. But it's really hard for a cancer doctor, for an oncologist, to take care of breast cancer and lung cancer and prostate cancer and every imaginable cancer. And I think increasingly what you're going to see is that at most centers, that they're really prostate cancer specialists who are taking care of prostate cancer. and that people are going to should really look for that kind of level of specialization.
Good question.
But
I've read the-
you also have to feel like you can communicate with your doctor. It's when you're healthy, if your primary care doctor is somebody you get along with or you don't get along with quite as well, but you see him once a year, it doesn't really have a huge impact on your overall quality of life. When you have a significant medical problem, whether it's cancer or anything else, that relationship with the healthcare system is a big part of your life, and you deserve to have a good relationship where you can communicate easily.
Doctor, we had a young man in our community who was like in his late 40s, and he said that he had a white doctor, and when he went to his doctor would spend 8 minutes and say, "I'm going to refill your prescription. How you feeling?" And then goodbye. But he met some of our cultural ambassadors who said, "Man, there's a lot of things that doctor you need to check out." So he went to a black doctor, and the black doctor spent 40 minutes with him and said, "Hey, you need and this is the time you need to get your ESA test. You need to exercise more." And so we realized that that's really a problem as well. How do we change? And that's one of the things that the cultural ambassadors are trying to do on a different level with our exposure program, is to get more young people interested in healthcare and positions in healthcare, so that healthcare can look more like it ought to look, in terms of the people who are going to be using this healthcare system. So do you have any recommendations that we can send some young interns your way, or some students who you might be able to?
Happy to talk to anybody, particularly if they're interested in cancer. And I'll just make one comment about that the white doctor who spent 8 minutes and the black doctor who spent 40. I hope that white doctor just spends 8 minutes with all patients. And I'm not saying that that's good, but at least if it's equitable, it makes me feel a little bit better. What really makes me nervous is the possibility that doctor might spend 30 minutes with people who he, or in some cases she, might be more comfortable with, or who's more like them, and is only spending 8 minutes with the black patient. And I think that's the worry that a lot of black men and women have when they see doctors.
And we have about 20 minutes, folks. Let's kind of continue to brainstorm and kind of commune with one another. Dr. Weiner, I had a question. You spoke I forget exactly how long ago, about testing process, and sometimes a testing score that a black woman might have, and a white woman might have the same testing score, but there's a difference in those testing scores in terms of the interpretation. Can you explain what that means?
Well, so I think that might refer to a test called Oncotype DX.
Yes.
And there's been at least one study that suggested that the implications of a score were somewhat different in black and white patients. But I'm going to actually tell you the interesting result of a study that was just presented at our big breast cancer meetings in San Antonio a week ago. And so this was from a very large randomized trial in which some women got chemotherapy and some women didn't get chemotherapy. And they analyzed the results by race. And the treatment was the same for everyone. I mean, apart from the fact that some people got chemotherapy, some people didn't, but that had nothing to do, obviously, with race. And it turned out that the chemotherapy wasn't beneficial anyway. So everybody was essentially the same. And the striking thing is that even though everybody was in a clinical trial, which you would think would sort of standardize care, women who were black had a significantly higher risk of having a recurrence of cancer than women who were white. And that, to me, was a very, very powerful result, because it wasn't saying that there was just a problem about access to care or about receiving care, but that there was something beyond that was affecting Black women with breast cancer. And whether that's structural racism or whether it's something else, we certainly need to figure that out. So, you know, these challenges that that Black women who have breast cancer have are really significant and really need to be both intervened on and at the same time researched.
You think genetics plays a part in that?
I think that's, I don't know, but I don't really think so. I think that's an easy way for people to sort of potentially explain something away, like, oh, well, maybe there's something different genetically. As you all know, you know, there isn't any, you know, the Black population in the country is a population that is genetically pretty diverse, as is the white population. And so I think it's much more likely to be something cultural, socioeconomic, what have you. And by the way, this result held up even when they controlled for body weight. Women who were Black tended to be a little heavier than women who were white. They factored that in, and it still held up.
What about economics?
Well, I think that's where you're, you know, that could be it. You know, social support is a big issue, although, you know, I don't know that there's any evidence that you know, Black women in the study had worse social support than white women.
But in terms of treatment, Dr. Weiner, it's really interesting. I had read the book on Emperor of All Maladies, and you know, because at one point I thought that it was a money-making racket for doctors to continue the pattern. But after reading that book, it just blew my mind in terms of how radical surgery moved to radiation and then chemo. And every doctor had their own kind of like position on where to go and which was the best form of treatment. How can we, is there a standard that we should be looking at in terms of, how do we work through that kind of?
I think we've come a long way, and there are now standard clinical pathways, and I think there's much more in the way of a consensus on the right way of treating different kinds of cancers. Sure, there's debate around the edges, but I think that we have more evidence than we ever did before. There are many groups that put together guidelines about how best to take care of people. And so I think that's less of a problem than it once was. If I can just add one more thing.
Please.
So at Yale, we are truly committed to trying to do something about the disparities in Connecticut. You know, Connecticut has the 5th highest median household income in the country and one of the greatest disparities by race. At Yale, we have 15 sites around the state. All of those sites within the next year or two will have subspecialized doctors, meaning breast cancer doctors, colon cancer doctors, what have you. And we're going to use those sites to then work hard to reach out to the community, to take a truly multi-pronged approach to see if we can possibly make a dent in the disparities. And I think we can. I think it's going to take a lot of hard work. I think it's going to take a lot of money, and we're going to try to raise that money to do it, both in terms of grants and in terms of philanthropy. But something I've said repeatedly over the last few years, if we stopped all drug development for cancer at the moment, we just decided we weren't going to create any new drugs, and we eliminated all disparities, race and beyond, and we made sure that everyone got the same care, we would have a far greater impact on cancer mortality than you could ever imagine. Now, I'm not saying it's an either or. I'm all for making new drugs and getting better treatments, but we can't do that without at the same time tackling the disparities issue. And And I will predict that 10 years from now, when we're at a point where we have cures for almost every cancer, that the big issue is going to be delivering those cares to that care to everyone in the United States, delivering those cures.
Dr. Weiner, thank you so much for being a prophet in this regard. We have 12 more minutes, but just as you were chatting about the optimism about cures in the future, those cures will not manifest themselves without effective clinical trials, correct?
Absolutely.
So chat a little bit about the need for that, the clinical trial component.
Well, so there's no treatment that has ever gone from somebody's laboratory bench to a pharmacy shelf without a clinical trial in between. So we conduct large numbers of clinical trials. Some are randomized trials where people get the best available care and compare it to something that may be better. Sometimes they're just a single arm trial where everybody gets the same treatment. But clinical trials are critical. We know that we don't have as many Black and Hispanic patients in clinical trials as we should. It's a huge problem. And if we don't, then it's harder to apply the results to a diverse population. And we also know that one of the biggest problems with including a more diverse population is just getting their doctors to ask them to participate in the trials. Of course, the other is that trials can be really complicated and require extra visits, and we need to provide support for people to come in for those visits. But we do need to diversify our clinical trials. Ultimately, the real solution is to make sure that there are no disparities in healthcare, and then clinical trials will include everyone who wants to participate. But until we get there, we're going to have to make some special efforts to make sure that the trials themselves include a pretty diverse population.
Tremendous. Please, Reverend Clayton, we have 10 more minutes, and please weigh in.
My internet may be a little bit unstable, but Dr. Weiner, I thought I heard you say that there was a study where half the group was giving chemotherapy and half the group did not receive that.
Correct.
And the results were
the same.
So if that is true, why do most of the cancer patients receive chemo?
This was one specific group of patients. This was postmenopausal women with estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, where I would have predicted that chemotherapy wouldn't help a lot, and it didn't. And we no longer give chemotherapy in that setting.
In that setting. Okay.
But in general, I think that what you can expect in the future is a little less chemotherapy, a lot more immunotherapy, a lot more targeted, personalized therapy. Chemotherapy can be a good treatment, but it's unfortunately a little bit non-specific. It doesn't discriminate between the cancer cells and the normal cells as well as you would like. So it has lots of side effects.
Do you think that the mRNA studies might have some effect on cancer treatments in the future?
All right.
Like the Pfizer vaccine and the flu vaccine.
Yes. I think they may. If you have cancer already, and certainly if you have advanced cancer, a lot of people think that vaccines are just not going to be potent enough to make a big difference, certainly not by themselves. I think if we could identify a high enough risk group of individuals for a specific kind of cancer, then it is conceivable that vaccines could play a real role there.
And Reverend Weiner, I think Dr. Perry is referencing that the MR that new technology be used to create a virus, a vaccine to prevent you from getting cancer?
Yeah, who knows?
Good. Well, that's why you do trials, right? Right.
That is exactly right.
Right. If gentlemen, we have 10 more minutes. Let's just kind of brainstorm however the spirit moves you. Dr. Weiner, I wanted to ask, you were talking to a high school senior class, class of 23 that's graduating in the high schools. If I could have you talk to every high school senior right now through Zoom, what would you tell them about why they should enter the health profession, why they should consider science to be important in terms of their future? Because all of us on this Zoom call and radio show are AARP eligible. But it seems to be that there are those, in their 16 and 17, this is their world that we want to kind of see them thrive and survive and prosper in, even after we're long gone. I just wonder what you would say to folks, young people, about the importance of discovering science, of being scientifically oriented, being scientifically literate, and considering the health professions.
So I will tell you, a real believer in a very strong general education, and in the humanities, and in learning languages, and all sorts of different endeavors. I do think that even if you pursue those fields, it's important to be scientifically literate, because that's just where the world is going. And science changes so quickly that I think to be a citizen of the world, you have to be able to keep up with it. As a career, I think being in science is incredibly exciting, and I think you can have a huge impact on others in the world. And if I can speak specifically to being a doctor, there are a lot of people, you hear doctors say, oh, I'd never tell anyone to be a doctor again. I'd tell anybody to be a doctor. I think it is one of the most glorious ways of spending a career. When somebody is sick and they come see you, you are given an opportunity to enter their lives in a way that most people don't have a chance to do. And if you choose to do that, it's a pretty rich experience. And so I'm a big proponent of people going into the healthcare field, whether it's as a nurse or as a doctor or as a physician assistant or a social worker or anything. But that's not right for everybody. And I know lots of kids who say, I'd never want to do that, but I would be a scientist. And again, even if you're not going to be a scientist, keep abreast of science, learn about science, so that 30 years from now, people aren't speaking a language that you don't understand because you haven't been able to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Warner, I think that the Yale cultural ambassadors really need your help, because we're seeking to achieve the same goals. One of the things that we're looking at, the FDA we're working with a kiosk that we can put in our churches and in community centers, where individuals can go in and do telemedicine. They could go in and get, test their temperature or blood pressure or other things, but also they could ask questions. So for me, your input on what we might be able to put into that kiosk that would help with the screening or the information that we could give individuals who use it, I think would be invaluable for us and the FDA. So I'm going to get back to you on that. I'll give you time to think about it. The other question is not related to this. It's related to Russian studies. One of my classmates, Paula Lieberman, was Dr. Lieberman. She was taking Russian studies, and she was taking it for years at Yale. And you're the first person I've ever heard that studied Russian, history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I love doing it, but I needed to be a doctor. And you may say you need my help, but I need your help to do what I want to do.
Yes.
Right.
That's why we're here to build that collective bond, particularly the march into 23 with a unified force. We have 4 more minutes, everyone. I want to give Dr. Weiner the last word, of course. Just wonder whether there are any questions or concerns or comments on your mind, Reverend Clayton? Okay, I think he's
frozen.
He's frozen.
There he is.
Well, I'll have him.
Dr. Weiner spoke about that he would never tell a person not to be a doctor. He probably would encourage people to be a doctor. And on our end, we would encourage people to become part of the clergy, because the faith and the science works wonders for people. You know, there's some people who will don't go to the doctor until they're really sick. And there's some people who don't call a preacher or a chaplain until they're in the hospital. So it works together, and we thank God that these two careers do some marvelous things for so many people. And
Well,
Dr. Weiner, if I get a chance, I thank you so much for your comments and your insight today. It was brilliant.
Indeed.
Well, Reverend Clayton, let me tell you that this raised Jewish doctor has a son-in-law who is an Episcopal priest, who is married to my son, who is a doctor.
Wow.
So, so I have the clergy in my family now.
All right.
Wow.
Dr. Weiner, let me ask the elephant in the room, perhaps, question. We've had prohibition. We tried prohibition here in America. Cigarettes have now, the cost of taxes have gone up, and there's warnings on the cigarette packages about the negative effects of smoking. Should smoking be prohibited? I know there would be a black market, and I know you've had conversations with this even in your dreams, but it just seems to me if we have a lethal drug that's available on the market, that society, government, public health, all the indicators that we do, it should be, in my mind, abolished, prohibited. Just your thoughts in that regard.
Well, I think cigarettes are a killer. And I would love to just get rid of them. I don't know if that, as a realist, I don't know that that's going to happen, but I am certainly encouraged by the fact that smoking rates continue to drop and drop and drop. And our public health messages have worked. And so I think we just, short of abolishing cigarettes and other tobacco products, I think we just need to continue to be more and more restrictive.
Excellent. Thank you.
So marijuana's okay?
No comment.
That's the next show. The next show. So we'll throw in marijuana and psychedelics. We'll move down the road. Again, Harry's going to play the music in about 30 seconds. Reverend Clayton, you want a short last word, and then I want to give Dr. Weiner the last word as well.
I'm good. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Tom, for
and thank you, Dr. Weiner. I appreciate so much your being on this show.
Okay, Harry, that's a wrap. Dr. Weiner, thank you as well. I really appreciate it. You're just sharing your honesty, your integrity, and your passion as we move forward. Let's
thank you so much.
Thanks.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. Whoa. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, hey. Yeah, this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. Way too long, we faced them storms. Now you gon' face the dawn you waited for. I said from night to dawn, I right my wrongs alone. In competition with warnings, ice galore. Now I'm running toward them highlights, I'm finished being a quitter. But little by little, they joking, telling some riddles. Now I'm in my section, ain't willing to give up. Know you getting knocked down, but you gotta get up. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, hey. cause this is my road. Lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, hey.